soon. But first, the news from NPR. It's 7 o'clock.
Good morning. The man at the center of a terror investigation goes to court today. We'll hear why authorities say the case of Najib Bouazizi could be the most worrying since 9/11. On Morning Edition from NPR News. Coming up, what Ambassador Richard Holbrooke learned in Afghanistan. I'm Steve Inskeep.
And I'm Renee Montaigne. New Yorker writer George Packer tells us why a man of action must maneuver around, quote, a China shop without breaking the China. Colombia's high court finds sending drug lords to trial in America deprives Colombian victims of justice. Cultivating coral to create new reefs off the coast of Florida, plus climate-friendly skies. San Francisco's airport begins selling carbon offsets at kiosks. And this Tuesday, September 29th, is Sophia Loren's birthday. She's 75. The news is next.
From NPR News in Washington, I'm Giles Snyder. President Obama meets today with the Secretary General of NATO to talk about Afghanistan. Aides say any decision about sending more U.S. troops to that country is still weeks away. NPR's Scott Horsley reports.
The president is holding a series of meetings at the White House this week as he tries to reassess U.S. strategy in Afghanistan. General Stanley McChrystal is expected to ask for thousands of additional troops to carry out a counterinsurgency strategy there. But White House spokesman Robert Gibbs says the president first wants to decide whether that's the right approach.
We're going to be very deliberate. You heard the president say, I think quite clearly, that he owes it to the men and women in uniform and to their families that we take the time that's necessary to get this decision right.
The counterinsurgency strategy, first announced back in March, has been called into question by last month's fraud-ridden election in Afghanistan and by a situation on the ground that military commanders say is worse than they expected. Scott Horsley, NPR News, the White House.
In Afghanistan today, a bus struck a roadside bomb, killing at least a dozen civilians and wounding many more. NPR's Soraya Sarhadi-Nelson reports from Kabul.
Afghan officials say the public bus struck the bomb in southern Afghanistan while traveling to Kabul from the western city of Herat. Official reports said anywhere from 12 to 30 people were killed. Most of those killed were women and children. Afghan soldiers and passers-by with cars ferried the wounded to the southern city of Kandahar. The more seriously injured were taken to a NATO hospital. Meanwhile, in the western province of Farah, military officials said a joint U.S.-Afghan force killed at least 30 Taliban fighters. More than 500 Afghan and coalition soldiers took part in the operation, which lasted more than 12 hours. Yesterday's operation occurred in a volatile region near the villages where a U.S. airstrike killed dozens of civilians during another lengthy battle last May. Afghan and U.S. officials say no civilians were killed in the recent fighting. Soraya Sarhadi-Nelson, NPR News, Kabul.
Iran's nuclear chief is being quoted as saying that Tehran will soon inform the UN nuclear watchdog agency of the timetable for inspection of its newly revealed uranium enrichment facility. But Ali Akbar Salehi told reporters in Tehran today that Iran will not discuss any issues related to its nuclear rights at Thursday's meeting in Geneva. Diplomats from the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council in Germany meet with Iran on Thursday amid criticism from the White House of Iran's missile testing over the weekend. A closely watched gauge of home prices around the nation has come in stronger than expected. The S&P Case-Shiller Composite Index of home prices in 20 metropolitan areas shows improvement for the 6th month in a row. The index rose 1.2% in July. However, home prices are still more than 13% below July a year ago. Stocks are up on Wall Street, the Dow up 25 points, the NASDAQ up 5. This is NPR. The Afghan immigrant accused of plotting a terrorist attack is due in federal court in New York City this morning. Najib Bouazizi will be arraigned in Brooklyn on charges of conspiring to use weapons of mass destruction. Officials say he joined others in planning to turn common chemicals into explosives. The board of directors of the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation is expected to take unprecedented action today to shore up the dwindling fund that insures bank deposits. NPR's Debbie Elliott reports.
The FDIC's insurance fund has lost billions in a rash of bank failures, at least 95 this year alone. At the end of June, the fund was down to $10.4 billion from $45 billion a year ago. Regulators have already imposed an emergency fee on banks this year and today are likely to require prepaid premiums for the first time. That option would have banks pay 3 years' worth of premiums in advance and could bring in about $36 billion. The banking industry prefers the prepaid plan to another emergency fee. The FDIC forecasts the fund will need $70 billion through 2013 to deal with losses from more anticipated bank failures. In addition to the insurance fund, the FDIC has cash reserves and a line of credit with the U.S. Treasury. Debbie Elliott, NPR News.
Lawyers for filmmaker Roman Polanski are asking that Polanski be released from Swiss custody. They filed a motion to that effect in court today. A court statement says it will make a decision within the next few weeks. Polanski is fighting extradition to the United States. His arrest in Switzerland over the weekend stems from a 1977 statutory rape case. This is NPR News.
Support for NPR comes from Ann and John Herman, supporting City Year and the young adults who dedicate a year of their lives to community service and leadership development. cityyear.org.
Good morning, it's 7:06 and I'm Cherry Glazer for KCRW. Well, you just heard it from NPR. Lawyers for Roman Polanski filed a motion in court today asking that the Oscar-winning movie director be released from Swiss custody. It's the first step in his legal battle to avoid extradition to the United States for statutory rape. The Swiss Federal Criminal Court said a decision will be made in its words, within the next few weeks. Back in the 1970s, Polanski pleaded guilty to unlawful sex with a 13-year-old girl. He was sent to prison for 42 days, but the judge tried to renege on a plea bargain. On the day of his sentencing, Polanski fled to France. Over the years, a number of high-profile Hollywood defendants have gotten off relatively lightly in criminal cases. Think Robert Blake and Paris Hilton. But Pepperdine law professor and former federal prosecutor Carol Chase says this is one situation where fame may not work in the defendant's favor.
Some people might argue that because he's so high-profile, he may be being singled out after a long period of time to be made an example of. I think the fact that he is so high-profile made it perhaps easier for him to be arrested overseas because it was easier to find out where he actually was.
Meanwhile, we're now getting word that Polanski's own lawyers may have helped provoke his arrest by complaining to an appeals court that LA prosecutors had never made any real effort to arrest the director. The Los Angeles Times reports that accusation that the DA was not serious about extraditing Polanski was just a small part of a couple of court filings made by the director's attorneys this summer, but sources say it caught the attention of prosecutors and led to his arrest in Switzerland over the weekend. An Orange County man accused of texting while driving and then hitting and killing a pedestrian has now been ordered to stand trial for gross vehicular manslaughter. KCRW's Mitch Earl has more on that story.
Martin Kuehl fatally struck Martha Ovalle as she walked at a Newport Beach crosswalk in August 2008. Orange County Superior Court Commissioner James Odrizola determined yesterday that there was enough evidence that the accident was caused by more than ordinary carelessness and denied a defense motion to lessen the charge to a misdemeanor. The commissioner noted that while Kuehl did not send or receive texts at the exact time of the impact, he had his cell phone in his hand and had been texting prior to striking Ovalle. Meanwhile, the trial of Jeffrey Woods, a man accused of killing a teenage bicyclist while texting in August 2007, is due to start on Friday. Prosecutors say Woods was also driving under the influence of Vicodin at the time. For KCRW, I'm Mitch Earl.
And the LA City Council will consider a proposal today that would require all new buildings built in the city, including homes, to have an anti-graffiti coating. Under the proposed plan, the coating would cover the walls and doors from the ground level to a height of at least 9 feet. Now, exceptions could be granted if the property owners sign a contract and promise to remove any graffiti on their property within a week. And that's KCRW News. Taking a look now at traffic. Well, getting the all clear for the CHP. Northbound 405 past the 605. Earlier signal has been wrapped up. All lanes reopened. But traffic is jammed coming away from Bolsa. Also, the West 22 affected from before Valley View. Meanwhile, problems for the southbound 405 at Inglewood. This is in the Lawndale area. CHP wrapping up with an earlier wreck at the right shoulder. And in West LA, North 405 past Santa Monica Boulevard. Just getting reports of an accident there. Well, it's finally starting to feel a little bit like fall out there. Low clouds and fog going to be hanging around for a while this morning. Should be seeing some sunshine by this afternoon, though. Highs today will be in the 70s at the beaches, 70s, low 80s in the valleys. It's 66 degrees right now in downtown Los Angeles, 64 in Marina del Rey, 60